Greetings to everyone joining from the Caribbean, India, and throughout the world. It is a pleasure to serve as your moderator for what we anticipate to be a very exciting and insightful discussion on leadership in education. My name is Nisha Yearwood. I am a program officer in the Continuing and Professional Education Center based in the office of the Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal of the UWI Open Campus. Throughout the month of March, Whiteboard Labs, as well as the UWI Open Campus, have been celebrating women, their strength, their power, their roles in the home, society, workplaces, and education. The discussions thus far have been very thought provoking, very real and candid conversations on some of the common experiences shared by women around the world. So if you haven't, I encourage you to also check out some of those previous live streams. For today's discussion, our presenter is Dr. Luz Lonsworth, Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal of the UWI Open Campus. She holds a doctorate in Business Administration and Higher Education Management from the University of Bath in the United Kingdom. Dr. Lonsworth's research focuses in the fields of leadership development, change management, and organizational development and transformation. She is a certified trainer in leadership courses in 360-degree leadership, communication skills, accelerating teamwork, and 5 levels of leadership for the internationally renowned John Maxwell Company. Though I'm serving as moderator, as a member of staff of the UWI Open Campus, I'm very excited to be present in the audience to hear some of Dr. Lonsworth's experiences within the scope of leadership in education, given her many years of expertise, experience, and dedication to the field. Hence, without further ado, I will stop speaking and hand over to Dr. Lonsworth for today's presentation. Please post any questions, queries, comments, and chats via the various media forums that you have been joining from for the presenter to address during the question and answer segment. Colleagues, guests, viewers worldwide, Dr. Lonsworth.
Thank you so much, Nisha, and thanks for your very kind introduction. And you're quite right. My very many years of experience in education is what I'm hoping to share today. I really want to first say thank you to the team at Whiteboard Labs, as well as our Open Campus team that has come together to really present this wonderful series of lectures and panels over the month of March. And I am very honored to close the month and to speak about leadership in education and the woman's role in that. And then to share with you some of my experiences as I have evolved in this role over the many years, as Nisha has rightly said. So today I'm really going to start by giving a brief background on some of the issues that face women who are looking at leadership roles in education at the moment. Many of these issues are not different from what happens to women in any industry, but there are some peculiarities in education that that I think we want to be aware of as we women, and many, I hope, of our audience are women who are working in education. I will focus on higher education rather than any of the other sectors because that's where I have been for most of my working life. So the topic is leadership in education. And I ask the question, and you can answer it at the end, is it a woman's world? And in looking at that, I want to focus and start with where we see education, particularly in the University of the West Indies, which is my base. And I will focus a lot on what's happening there since the UWI is really in the Caribbean, the institution that has the largest number of students and academic professionals. So we can look at that as a sort of, sort of a case study of what is really happening in higher education in the Caribbean. So if I look at where our students are, I can tell you that this is nothing unusual. Everyone knows this, that in the UWI, and I think this is something that is actually happening in all of our institutions across the region and indeed in the world, over 70% of our students are female, are women. But I want to point something out because it will be relevant as I move on, that female enrollment in subjects, in subject areas, in professional areas that are seen as key for the future of work or Industry 4.0 is relatively low in the UWI. And we are finding that in science and technology, although it has increased over time, we're still below 50% of the students enrolled being female. And in engineering and in computer science, it's even lower, with under 40% enrollment. And these figures are from the 2018-19 academic year. Women are in the majority in the humanities, in the social sciences, now in law, and also in medicine. But in terms of these areas where we're looking at Industry 4.0, where we are seeing that is still below 50%, which is where we really want to be. Now, if I look at our academic staff, and I can widen it a bit from some of the research done by colleagues, and we look at the wider Caribbean, we will start by seeing that in Jamaica, less than a third of the total number of professors in the 4 universities and colleges in Jamaica, the top 4 universities, less than a third of the professors are women. Going to the UWI hires or employs, over 50% of the employees are female, are women, but only 45, in other words, less than 25% of the 164 professors are women. And this is our top university, my university. The very first woman professor in science and technology at one of our largest campuses was appointed only in 2020, after 70 years of, pretty much teaching science and technology. This is one of our largest campuses. Of course, in other campuses, we've had women professors in science and technology, but it just goes to show what I'm looking at is the pipeline for leadership in the universities. Moving further into the higher education leadership now, we see that in the UWI, only 3 of us 3 women are part of the top 11 executive leaders. And that's an improvement because I would say 7 years ago, there was 1. In the Commonwealth Caribbean, that's the English-speaking Caribbean, there are only 3 women who fill top leadership positions in 11 universities or campuses of the UWI. And I'm one of those, of the 3. The other one is my colleague, Professor Barito, and my colleague from the University of Guyana. Now, in the wider Caribbean, which includes the French, Dutch, and Spanish speaking, and here I need to explain something, that in terms of these universities, these would then be not the campuses which I referred to, but the overall university. And I want to just correct that figure because my colleague from Guyana would be included in that. It should be 2, only 2 women in top leadership positions out of 31 universities. And that would be our Vice Chancellor from the University of Guyana, and the president of the University of Havana. And of course, just as a point of reference, the USA, North America, one would think has led in gender equity, but it's not that much different in North America based on the research, where it shows only 33%, again, way below at least a 50%, given the preponderance of women in middle management in colleges. Only 33% of college presidents are female in the US. So that gives you an idea of what is happening. And the important thing is we know that it has taken some time for women to move into leadership positions, but my personal concern is the pipeline, the succession. I did a speech some many years ago which spoke about making sure that our firsts were not our lasts, that we must have a pipeline of women coming into leadership positions. Otherwise, we'll keep saying, this is the first woman to do this, the first woman. And we don't want that. We really want to just say, this is our next vice chancellor or our next whatever, So the question is then, why is this so? Why do we have this, this preponderance of inequity in our education, our higher education system in our region and beyond? Especially as we look, and I'm going to just put on here a slide you might be familiar with. When we look at what is coming or what we are currently in, and we've been thrust into Industry 4.0 because of the pandemic. And there are a couple of things that I want to highlight, and you'll see them in different colors, that the Industry 4.0 organization, which includes educational organizations, need different types of leadership skills. And we see that, you have multi-generational organizations, they're virtual, they're mobile and agile, they're innovative, focused on technology as the center, the interface between man and machine. But the two that I have highlighted in different colors are areas where it is key to the success of the new organization and the success of any educational organization as well. And we see that there's an emphasis on what are called soft skills. And I've been trying very hard to find another name for it, because I really believe that soft is not the word for those skills, and we'll talk about those. And there's a focus on health and well-being, mind, body, and soul. These two areas have traditionally been seen as feminine, as feminized leadership, and not given any serious consideration, so that women are often seen it as soft and therefore not really able to make the hard, tough decisions. And this has been seen in universities as well. Surprisingly, you would think it wouldn't be, but in higher education, we're no different from other industries in that regard. So what are we seeing in some of the research that I've looked at in terms of soft skills? In the 21st century, what we're finding is that the new organization, the Industry 4.0 organization, really requires soft skills, and women's skill sets are showing up as being appropriate. So some research that was done by a professor at Chase said that the men and women are looked at, but women are more likely to use emotional self-awareness. The women are more likely to demonstrate empathy, and only recently, as recent as yesterday, Google put out an article that said empathy is the leadership characteristic of the present and the future. Other competencies, and that's the fourth bullet, other competencies in which women outperform men are coaching and mentoring, influence, inspirational leadership, conflict management, organizational awareness, adaptability, teamwork, and achievement orientation. This is a study that he did, right? I'm not going to critique it here, but this is among Fortune 500 companies. And the point is that women have the skills. We have the skills that are required for high performance, right? But here, what we see is that many times these are seen as not as important skills as perhaps the harder skills, the technology, the finance, and so on. But that is changing. So Dr. Boyatsis, who did this research from Case Western, says historically in the workplace, there has been a tendency for women to self-evaluate themselves as less competent, while men tend to overrate themselves in their competencies. Research shows, however, that the reality is often the opposite. If more men acted like women in employing their emotional and social competencies, they would be substantially and distinctly more effective in their work. Now, I don't want this to come over as bashing men, but what I do want it to show is that women are often too hard on themselves in terms of evaluating themselves. And the issue is, are we our worst enemies in terms of our own self-evaluation, or what is now being called, the imposter complex? And I want to share some of that with you in terms of my own personal experience, and why is that so? Given all the research that is coming out in terms of women's skills, their ability to lead, why are there not more women moving forward? So in considering my own experiences, I would say that the major challenge for women, one, is really not being confident enough, not being what I call self-efficacy enough to feel that they can put themselves forward for promotion. Anecdotally, I can tell you that a lot of women in the university setting do not put themselves forward for leadership positions or professorships because they don't think they're ready yet. And this is something that is seen in many other professions. Women, I recently read some research that showed that men will apply for a position even if they have under 60% of the required skill sets, while women won't. They will wait until they think that they have all of the skill sets before they apply. And the reason, I think, is that, women are often nervous about putting themselves forward for positions because of fear of failure. And I did some research about 2 years ago, which spoke about women who were put in leadership positions for companies and organizations, schools that were in trouble, that were in financial trouble, that were in organizational trouble. And that when the organization fails, the woman is thrown off what is called the glass cliff. So we're aware of the glass ceiling. So, you're promoted and you're the first woman to be president of your company. You've shattered the glass ceiling, but you're also more vulnerable to being thrown off what is called the glass cliff if the organization does not prosper under your leadership. And there are several examples of that. Carly Fiorina of Hewlett Packard. And indeed, even within the higher educational system, we see that people feel that, well, it's, a woman can turn this thing around. Interestingly, if she doesn't, she's blamed for the failure. And if she does, the research, not my research here, but research done on Fortune 500 companies shows that she's likely to be succeeded by a man and not by another woman. So it's a bit of fear of failure, a bit of fear of putting yourself out there and then not being able to meet the standards, or to see other women who have been who have had this kind of experience. So that is something that we need to get over, and our younger women coming up, we need to support them to know that they can still go ahead and that there is nothing wrong even if they fail. Men fail too, right? So as we move forward and on this, and I added one more S at the last minute, so it's actually 5 S's. So as I look at what my career has been, I think the first one is what I've been speaking about, the issue of what I call self-efficacy. And that's more than self-confidence. What that is not just being confident that you have the skills, but really believing and knowing that you have the ability and the skill sets to do the particular job. So that takes some time. It requires quite a lot of support within your organization, but you really have to know that you can do this job, and not to to really just get drawn into this sense that, boy, maybe I shouldn't be here. Or maybe I mean, am I really ready for this role? I think that this is something that we've been socialized to think of, you know. So self-efficacy is my first S. My second is sit at the table, and literally sit at the table. You know, find a seat at the decision-making table. Interesting, you know, dynamic in watching women go into a boardroom is that many times the woman will not sit at the head or towards the head of the table, if they even sit at the table. And that's something that I learned early, that when you go in, find out where is the head, where is the chair, if you're not the chair, of course, where is the chair going to sit, and you sit beside the chair. It is, you know, you are, unless there is special seating, you are at the table. Do not sit on one of the side chairs. And that's something I really learned in my career. And I've found that it is very handy, because if you, when you hear the phrase sit at the table, you think, oh, you know, it's just a sort of metaphor for being part of the decision-making process. And indeed it is. But literally, of course, now in this environment of Zoom, we don't actually sit at the table, but turn on your video so that you are seen. And as one female leader said, if you're not given a seat at the table, then go make your own table. Start your own business, you know, go to a company that, or an institution that does actually give you a seat at the table where you can speak. And once you're there, speak up. This is important. Do speak up, and speak up even if you know that what you're going to say is not going to be listened to, or it's going to be mansplained. And experiences I've had over the years, and to be honest, it hasn't been reduced that much, somewhat, but not that much, is that you will make a statement as a woman, and you will make a recommendation, and you will speak up at the table, and no one will comment, or people might even, you know, contradict you. But maybe 10 minutes later, one of your male colleagues will say exactly the same thing you said, and everyone will say, oh, what an excellent idea. You know, don't take it personally, just keep on doing it, right? Because one day it'll work. I've found that is perhaps the thing that has, I think, affected women quite a bit. And it makes some women quite aggressive and inauthentic, in the sense that, you know, you get angry and so on. Remember, emotional intelligence, you have to control it and just continue to speak your truth and to be yourself. You know, if you are the kind of person who is going to confront that, then sure, do that. But if not, you know, don't feel that you have to think like a man to move forward. You have to be authentic, especially when leading in education, because education is a key developmental tool, and you can't have inauthentic leaders, whether they're men or women, in education. The fourth one, is the fourth S is sisterhood. A lot of people say this, and I have experienced it, that some of the harshest critics of women in education are other women in education, and that is true. And there's nothing wrong with critiquing other women. Indeed, you know, women shouldn't be treated differently in terms of their performance. They should be critiqued. They should be, you know, they should be helped. They should be supported. But one area of lack, I find, is that oftentimes there isn't necessarily that empathy with other women in education who are going through difficult times in their leadership journey. And I think it's changing. I believe that maybe the generation that had to fight for a place at the table before mine had such a difficult time that they really, you know, put a lot of pressure on other women. But but one of the things about Sisterhood is also offering mentorship and coaching and guidance for younger women that are coming up the pipeline. And without that, we won't have that last S, which is succession. And again, the point is that I worry that not in our educational system, even though women are still in the majority, that we don't have a definite succession plan for our leadership, our female leadership, so that we can actually see them moving into the positions that are opening. It's getting better, but that is one concern, that you will have long gaps, for instance, between having women at the leadership table. In the University of the West Indies, for example, the first time that we had a female principal, acting principal, would have been in 2007. And then we had a female principal for 2008. But that is, 60 years after the university was formed. We still do not have, or have never had, apart from Princess Alice, who was the founding chancellor, a female chancellor, and we still have not had a female vice chancellor in the University of the West Indies. So, one looks then down the pipeline, and you wonder how many more years will it be, given who we see coming up. We're not mentoring, we're not planning enough in education. I was mentored quite a lot, and mentored by both women and men. And that's something that we need to recognize as female leaders in education, that because men are still dominant, that there is nothing wrong with men mentoring women. One of my greatest mentors was Professor Gerald Lalo, who I served as his executive assistant. Never in any moment did I ever think I would be a principal as he was. But he used to say to me, Luz, I am a scientist and I want to do my science. You run the campus. And, he gave me that sort of latitude to grow and to hone my skills in that area. So, I've had as many men. My mother has been a tremendous mentor for me in terms of leadership skills and approaches to managing people. So sisterhood, mentorship, succession planning, being able to speak up, speak your truth, finding your seat at the table, making sure that you know that you can do the job, that you have all the degrees that are necessary, or you have all the skill sets, you have the ability. Those are the important things as a woman in education, or a woman in almost any kind of industry. But since we're speaking about education, I'm just sharing my ideas. And people will say, things to you that make you feel that you're not ready. They'll say, I was sharing with a colleague that, I have been told of course, many, many years ago, oh, but you're too young and you're too pretty for this job. Because people don't take you seriously oftentimes when you're young. And for women in particular, physical appearance does influence the way some people look at you. And in fact, even most recently, when I was appointed as principal, and that's only 6 years ago, I encountered a senior male official in one of the islands who made a comment that suggested that perhaps the only reason I was appointed was because of how I looked. And that is only 6 years ago. So the ideas are still there that that women perhaps are not moving ahead based on their ability, but thankfully it is becoming less and less, particularly as we see that our skill sets, our ability for empathy, compassion, consensus building, team building, all motivation, all of those skills that women have almost naturally, that those are the key skills for the 21st century organization. And thankfully, more and more people, not just women, men and women, are recognizing that. So as I close, here are some of my recommendations for women and what we should do in our environments, in education in particular. I think gender policies are very important. The UE just in about 4 years ago put in a gender policy, but it creates a framework for intentional and deliberate mentoring of women in education for them to move up. Mentoring is very important, but don't fool yourselves. The old boys club, as they call it, is still there. So I'm always one for forming, not, I wouldn't call it an old girls club, but a sisterhood, that looks out for other women who are moving up. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we as women who've been through the fire, so to speak, to get to where we are, we can guide, and we should and must support other women as they move up. Another issue that stops women from moving up is the responsibility of the family, raising children. For instance, I delayed my doctorate, and no regrets, because you realize that you have, to raise a family, and you focus on that. And that sometimes means that women don't actually move to the top of their career until they're relatively older than men in the academy. So if you look at the age of the female professors versus the male professors, average age, then you'll note that the female professors generally become professors at a later age. To date, the UWI has had no young woman in the sense of being the youngest professor ever. They've all been men so far. The institution has to have family-friendly policies, therefore, in order to support women's progress. So I was lucky, because in my progress, maybe I chose them or they chose me, but all of my seniors, my bosses, were very understanding of family obligations, and it never stopped me then from doing my job. And you find that women will do both. You'll cradle your sick baby at night and still go and chair your meeting at 7 a.m. in the morning. But institutions have to recognize that those things do lead to burnout, and they lead to the lack of progress of women. And we have to have intentional approaches to grooming women where we're seeing those inequities. There has to be, some positive action. We have to say, well, look, we need to have at least 50% of our leadership team has to be female, because that is representative of the population, where more than 50% of the women are in middle management and higher positions. So we have to have targets, I think. I mean, we must say that we want, in the next year that if there are only 30% of women on our boards and committees, that the next year there should be 35. We need to groom and to move them towards these targets. And we need to support other women in their career development as women who, wherever you are in the leadership of your educational institution or any institution, then you owe it to the other women who are coming up to help and guide them. And another article that I'm working on will speak to the glass bottom. And we speak of glass ceiling, we've spoken of glass cliff, but I have a theory about the glass bottom, and that is one of the things that tends to undermine women, is that we don't want to get into politics. We don't want to look at what is under the underbelly of the organization, what's going on underneath it. And I use that metaphor of the glass bottom boat, that really what we women who are in leadership need to do for the younger women is to help them to look beneath the surface of what is going on, and to understand how they can overcome the various elements that may move against them, or even to know what are the opportunities coming up for promotion. You know, sometimes you don't even know about those until they're gone. So so colleagues, I want to end here because I really want to hear from you, to hear what you think about some of the things I've said. And I just want to reiterate as we close Women's Month that we have to choose to challenge as women. We have to choose to sit at the table, speak up, support our sisters. So thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing from you in terms of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Longsworth, for this presentation. And I particularly liked all of the statistics and recommendations that you shared with us, because it takes us away from assumptions to seeing upfront the reality and also some of the prospects for the future. You mentioned that only 3 women are among the 11 executive leaders, which is an improvement. How do you see that progressing in the future, especially given how we align with Industry 4.0?
Right. I think that what we're seeing in the University of the West Indies now is with our gender policy and with the advocacy of many of the senior women who are either at the table or coming to the table soon, that we will be seeing more and more women coming in. I still feel there's going to be a gap, you know, because we may not have done so in a deliberate way long enough. It takes a while to train a cadre of people. So what we want is to see more women going into leadership positions. Excuse me a second. Let me just have some water. Putting themselves forward for leadership. Not being afraid to go and say, I think I can do, I know I can do this job. That's the self-efficacy, and coming forward. So I think that given the new skill sets required for Industry 4.0, excuse me, that women, I'm losing my voice, which is not a good thing for a woman. Women are able to feel more confident that they can lead an organization and lead it into success, not just lead it out of failure, but lead it into success, because the skill sets that we have are the skill sets for Industry 4.0. You know, our organizations have people who have the training, they have the technical skills, and it is the leadership that can weave all of those skills into a successful organization. I like to say, Nisha, and I think you've heard me, that I really don't do anything. It's the team that does everything. So every success for my campus comes from a team of people who just work so well and use their skill sets. I think that the one thing that I would say that a leader has to do, and that I do, is to look for the best people for the best roles, and then to just give them that opportunity, to give them the support, and to really encourage and motivate them to just be their best selves. Because inevitably, that's what a leader has to do. And that's what Industry 4.0 is saying. You know, we have all these young people coming out with wonderful skills, but we have to be able to mentor them, encourage them, and let them step into their own leadership.
Thank you so very much for that, Dr. Longsworth. And that really aligns to some extent to one of the comments that we received from our viewers from Facebook. One mentioned that the number one barrier to women is themselves, and that women don't empower and support each other enough. So that is very interesting to also hear that. And in addition to that, I know that you had mentioned Professor Garo Layler, and someone also mentioned within the Facebook chat, you know, what such a great leader that he is in science as well. One of the questions that we have here is that how do you account for the difference between high enrollment numbers of women and very low transition to leadership?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, some great research has been done, including by our own professors, emerita, Hamilton and Leo Riney, who were two of the first female leaders in terms of being at the pro vice chancellor level. And the research really shows that gap happening because women often step back in the academy to raise their families, right? And so if you know what it is like in a university, it's publish or perish. But if you have children, if you have sick babies, if you have children doing, common entrance and CSEC and so on, and I speak from my own experience, you find that it's not easy to kind of take a month off to write a paper and just do that without considering anything else. I used to make the joke that we women need wives because that's what that's what happens sometimes with our male colleagues, that they can do that and their wives will take care of the kids and the house and so on. So yes, there is that conversion factor. And that's why in my recommendations, I pointed out that institutions have to recognize that. And there's nothing wrong with a woman wanting to take some time off. And she has to be supported then in her career. It cannot be seen as, oh, so you weren't dedicated enough to continue to publish 3-4 papers and a book a year during the ages of 30 and 40. So you missed 10 years of publication because you were raising your children to a point where they could be independent. And so not that we want to lower standards for women moving up, but there has to be that support for women. So it means maybe more leave, looking at more leave. We've done some interesting things in UWI. So the unions have pushed for paternity leave, which is also very helpful because many husbands will help their wives, but they too have to go out to work. So paternity leave is something that is surprisingly, it is important for women because that allows women to get back into the stream of their progress. So yes, I think that is one of the things. And the second thing to the person asking is that women don't think that they're ready. Imposter syndrome. I suffer from it almost still, no matter how, some nights I wake up and I'm like, oh my goodness, I mean, am I really ready for this or can I really handle this? And that is something that is inbuilt that we need to really mentor our sisters out of, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You have the skill sets. There's nothing that you lack to allow you to do that. So we are, as someone said, we are sometimes the biggest block in our way, feeling insecure and not self-efficacious enough, so.
Okay, and that kind of leads as well into another comment that was shared in terms of that difficulty in the family life and also managing work life, showing the difficulties. Someone mentioned here, it shows the difficulty of how difficult it is for women to be in leadership roles, that they have to work sometimes 10 times harder than their male counterparts. And that is very real as well. And you mentioned some of your challenges in terms of family life and work life. How did you really navigate that challenge in terms of playing a leading role in education in your workplace and still taking care of your home?
Well, sisterhood and support. When I was raising my children, I had tremendous support from several people, and men and women. But in terms of the care of the home, there were several women who helped me. My mom used to take care of my children. I remember starting my MBA when my daughter was 6 months old. Crazy woman that I am. Yes, Nisha looks at me. But my daughter was 6 months old for 2 years. I worked and did my MBA. And but between my mother and an amazing woman who helped us in the house called Merle, both of my children, and that was my second child. I had 2 children under 6. and doing an MBA, every weekend, going to classes, and during the week working. So support, you need your support base for sure. But again, in this environment, what we need institutions that understand that, and this is why I really have to praise my Professor Lalo, because Professor Lalo was someone who understood that. I remember taking my two little children to work with me and him not quarreling. Although now we have regulations, when they were old enough, I used to give them jobs to do. Like in the days when we used to send out letters and invitations, they used to have to seal the envelopes and put the stamps on and so on. So, if you have a work environment, if we create work environments that encourage that have daycare facilities for employees, that is really the dream. And Nisha, I'd love to do that, to have that kind, so that parents can feel their children are safe, because that's a major issue, right? And here I say parents, not just mothers, but because women tend to be the primary caregiver of the child. Women, if they feel that their children are safe and nearby, they will be able to really fly. And I had that support. And I also had wonderful children who never blamed their mother for dragging them to work. In fact, they consider themselves to be UWI children, so they grew up around the university, and the university in that regard, and my part of the university that I worked in was very supportive, of me needing to leave when a child was sick and I had to pick her up from school or him up from school. I never felt that my job was in jeopardy. So in that regard, the UWI has been ahead of many organizations in being friendly towards women who are moving up in their career.
Thank you. And I think a lot of persons can appreciate that feedback. Even for me, as being a person that is new to the mother role and now learning how you have to navigate that in terms of also balancing work life is very interesting journey to be on. A last question that we have here is, what is the next move in formally establishing a sisterhood?
I guess that's a good question. I've always thought of it in a more informal way, in terms of just urging women to mentor women and to look out for other women in the organization. But the question speaks about formally establishing a sisterhood. And I believe that what we could do in our institutions, or we should do, is to really create a formal female mentorship program. It's very important. We do it in other organizations. For example, the Commonwealth of Learning that I'm a fellow of has established an excellent program across the Commonwealth, which is called Commonwealth Wise Women. And they've chosen women who are leaders in different areas across the Commonwealth to mentor young women who are moving up in their careers across the Commonwealth. I think there's nothing wrong with us doing that. One of the things you hear, even within the academy, is, well, I mean, why are you, preferencing this for women? But the truth is that despite the fact that people will say anecdotally that, women are getting more education, it's the men that are marginalized, the data is showing that it's still a man's world. And therefore, while I am all for ensuring that our boys get into higher education, I'm also keenly aware that the boys that are in higher education, as you can see, are in roles that are going to move them faster up the ladder of leadership than women. And so we have to intentionally mentor women. And thanks for that suggestion, because maybe it's something, Nisha, that we should look at more formally in our campus. Maybe Open Campus can be a lead in that regard, since we are the campus that has sustained female leadership in key areas throughout our existence. I mean, the Open Campus has had female leadership from its inception. And in fact, sometimes we're called the woman's campus. But I think people are seeing that, we have great men and we have great women that lead this campus. And women's campus or not, it is a performing campus. So, but I agree. I think we need more formalized programs of women mentorship in education.
I think that's a great idea. And just before we wrap up, I saw that one more question came in. If we can take it, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Would you suggest affirmative action for female leadership in higher education?
Affirmative action, yes. In that, one of my recommendations is that we have to set targets, right? And affirmative action has a sort of bad name because people think that, oh, you are dumbing down your requirements and moving people in because they don't, even though they don't meet the so-called standards. Not so. We have women who meet the standards, but affirmative action in terms of looking for women who meet those standards and moving them into the pipeline, definitely, right? Not saying that you're going to take someone who doesn't have the academic qualifications to be a professor and make them a professor, not at all. But you have to look for them and encourage them, because some of them may be just suffering from that imposter syndrome. So you have to really do it intentionally and to say, okay, this year we have 3 women who are in the executive. We need to have 5. Let us look for the women who are not putting themselves forward and move them forward into it. So I believe if you look at affirmative action in that way of setting targets for representation on key decision committees in key leadership positions, then there is absolutely nothing wrong with affirmative action to ensure that women are in place and giving of their talent. I mean, it's not women versus men. It's the fact that, basically there are 50% of the babies born are male and 50% are female. So if we're talking about an equitable world, then we should be seeing that balance right throughout our systems. Okay.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Longsworth. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of today's event. We hope that everyone viewing was able to take away something significant from today's message. And I know that a particular part of your message was that call to action in there to choose to challenge. So a special thanks to you, Dr. Longsworth, for serving as today's presenter and sharing all of your experiences with us. Thank you to all of the colleagues of Whiteboard Labs and the UWI Open Campus who worked in the background to make today's a very seamless event. And ultimately, profound gratitude to everyone that joined today's session, that shared their comments, their questions, their queries, wherever you were joining from in the world. Your attendance and participation and interaction was paramount to the success of today's event. So just to close off, wishing everyone a great remainder of the day. Thank you for joining us and celebrating with us women in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.